What if I told you that one of the most contested names on Earth, Palestine, has an origin story that almost no one gets right? We hear the name in the news every single day, tied to conflict, politics, and borders, but where did it actually come from? Is it an ancient Arab name, a modern political invention? The answer is way more complicated and fascinating than you think. It involves ancient Greek pirates, vengeful Roman emperors, and the slow grinding gears of history that shaped a people's identity over thousands of years. Forget the headlines for a minute. If you want to understand the real origin story of Palestine, the name, the land, and the people, you need to stick around. We're about to peel back layers of history you never knew existed. All right, let's just dive right in. When you hear the word Palestine, your brain probably jumps straight to the modern Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that makes sense. But to find the origin of the name, we have to rewind the clock, way back, like over 3,000 years ago. So the story begins in a region that, for most of ancient history, was called Canaan. It was a crossroads of empires, Egyptians to the south, Hittites and the Syrians to the north. It was a chaotic, busy, and constantly conquered piece of real estate. The people living there were, you guessed it, the Canaanites, along with a group that shows up around 1800 BCE, the Israelites, who would later form the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. For centuries, this was the status quo. But then, around the 12th century BCE, everything gets turned upside down. The great Bronze Age civilizations are collapsing, empires are turning to dust, and out of this chaos, a mysterious new group arrives on the shores of Canaan. The Egyptians called them the Peleset. We know them by a more familiar name, the Philistines. This is our first big aha moment. The name Palestine is the direct descendant of the word Philistine. They're the same root. So, case closed, right? The origin is the Philistines. Well, here's the first twist. The Philistines weren't from Canaan at all. Archaeological evidence, like their pottery and architecture, suggest they came from the Aegean world. Think ancient Greece or Crete. They were part of a mysterious group of seafaring raiders known as the Sea Peoples, who were terrorizing the entire Mediterranean. They settled on the southern coast of Canaan, in cities like Gaza, Ashkelon, and Ashdod. So get this, the people who gave the region its name were actually invaders from the sea who settled in a small coastal strip. They weren't Arabs and they weren't Semitic like the Canaanites or Israelites. They were, for all intents and purposes, European settlers in the ancient Middle East. Wild, right? But how did the name of this small group in this one coastal area end up being used for the entire region? That's where the story gets a major Roman plot twist. For centuries after the Philistines, the area was known by other names, most famously Judea, the heartland of the Jewish people. The Philistines themselves eventually vanished from history, assimilated into the surrounding cultures. Their name, however, lingered in the background, used by Greek writers like Herodotus to describe that southern coastal area. He called it Syria Palestina, or Philistine Syria. But it was just a geographical nickname, not an official title, until the Romans got angry. Really angry. In the 2nd century CE, the Jewish people of Judea rose up in a massive rebellion against the Roman Empire, known as the Bar Kokhba Revolt. It was a brutal, bloody war. After the Romans finally crushed the rebellion in 135 CE, Emperor Hadrian decided to punish the province with the ultimate insult. He wanted to erase the Jewish connection to the land from memory itself. So what did he do? He merged the Roman province of Judea with Syria and officially renamed the entire territory Syria Palestina. He chose that old, obscure Greek name Palestina precisely because it was connected to the Philistines, the ancient enemies of the Israelites. It was a calculated political act of renaming a way for Rome to say, "This land is not and never was yours." And just like that, the name stuck. The Roman Empire made Palestine the official name for the region, and it would remain that way for centuries to come. You know, we're building this channel, The Unifying Lens, to untangle exactly these kinds of complicated stories from history, to find the facts buried under the headlines. We believe that understanding the how and the why can give us a clearer picture of the world we live in today. If you appreciate that mission and you want to keep diving into these deep, fascinating topics with us, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button. It's a small click for you, but it helps us immensely in continuing to create content like this. Thank you. Now, back to the story. We've got the name, but what about the people? How did this Roman-named province transform into the Arab-speaking, predominantly Muslim region it would become? That's the next and maybe most crucial piece of the puzzle. Okay, so the Romans gave the land its name. But for the next few hundred years, under Roman and then Byzantine Christian rule, the population was a mix. Mostly Christians with significant Jewish and Samaritan communities. The Arab identity we associate with Palestine today hadn't really formed yet. That all changed in the 7th century CE. This is the second major turning point. The armies of Islam, bursting out of the Arabian Peninsula, conquered Byzantine Palestine around the year 638. They didn't call it Palestine, though. To them, it was a sub-district of a larger province of Syria, which they called Jund Falastin, meaning the military district of Palestine. So the name survived, just Arabized. But this wasn't just a military takeover. It was the beginning of a profound cultural shift that would take centuries. Over time, the local population, those Christians, Samaritans, and remaining Jews, slowly began to adopt the Arabic language, and for many, the Islamic faith. This wasn't a forced overnight conversion. It was a gradual process of assimilation, driven by culture, administration, and intermarriage. The Aramaic and Greek spoken in the streets slowly gave way to Arabic. The identity of the land was changing from the inside out. For the next 1,300 years, Palestine was ruled by a succession of Islamic dynasties: the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Fatids, the Crusaders, who briefly interrupted the timeline, then Salah al-Din's Ayyubids, the Mamluks, and finally, the longest-lasting of them all, the Ottoman Empire. From 1517 all the way to 1917, a staggering 400 years, the land was under Ottoman Turkish rule. Now here's a super important point that often gets lost. During this entire Ottoman period, there was no official country or province called Palestine. The area was divided into several administrative districts or sanjaks, which were mostly governed from Damascus or Beirut. So if you were a villager living near Jerusalem in, say, 1850, you probably wouldn't have thought of yourself as Palestinian in a national sense. You might identify with your village, your clan, your family, or your religion as a Muslim, Christian, or Jew. Your political identity was likely as an Ottoman subject. The idea of a unique Palestinian national identity hadn't fully crystallized yet. So when did that happen? When did people in this region start seeing themselves not just as Arabs living in a specific area, but as Palestinians with a unique national consciousness? The answer lies in the collapse of the very empire that had ruled them for 400 years, the end of World War I. As the Ottoman Empire crumbled, new ideas were sweeping the Middle East. One was pan-Arabism, the idea that all Arabs should unite in one great nation. But another, more local identity was also brewing. A distinct sense of connection to the specific land of historic Palestine began to grow, especially among the educated urban elites in cities like Jerusalem, Jaffa, and Haifa. They started newspapers, formed political clubs, and began to articulate a future for themselves, separate from Syria or Egypt. But this budding national identity was about to be thrown into a pressure cooker. Because at the exact same time, another group of people with an ancient connection to the same land were arriving with their own national dream. This was the Zionist movement. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, promising support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. After World War I, Britain was given control of the territory under what was called the British Mandate for Palestine. Suddenly, everything changed. For the first time in nearly 2 millennia, Palestine was once again a single distinct political unit on a map, and the British were now in charge of 2 competing and ultimately incompatible national aspirations within it. The massive increase in Jewish immigration under the Mandate and the conflict over land and resources that followed acted as an accelerant. It took that emerging sense of a distinct Arab identity in Palestine and fused it into a powerful, unified Palestinian nationalism. The shared experience of living under British rule and resisting the Zionist project forged a common identity. It was in opposition to these external forces that the modern political identity of the Palestinian people was truly born. They weren't just Arabs anymore. They weren't just former Ottoman subjects. They were Palestinians fighting for self-determination in the land they called Philistine. The origin story was now complete, a journey from an ancient Greek nickname to a modern national movement. So let's bring this all home. The origin story of Palestine is a story of layers. It's not one single event, but a cascade of them. First, you have the ancient layer, a name, Palestine, borrowed from a group of Asian sea raiders, the Philistines. It's a geographical label, not a national one. Then comes the Roman layer. Emperor Hadrian takes that obscure name and makes it official, deliberately trying to sever the Jewish connection to Judea. The name is now political. Next is the Arab-Islamic layer. For over 1,000 years, the culture of the land transforms. The population gradually becomes Arabic-speaking and predominantly Muslim, living in a region they call Philistine. The cultural identity is set. And finally, the modern layer, the crucible of the 20th century. The collapse of the Ottomans, the drawing of new borders by the British, and the clash with Zionism. This is the moment when all the previous layers, the name, the land, the culture, are fused together under immense pressure to create a modern national identity. The story of Palestine's origin isn't just about a name on a map. It's about the evolution of a people's consciousness. The modern Palestinian identity wasn't waiting fully formed in ancient times. It was forged in the fires of recent history. It was a response to the powerful forces of colonialism and competing nationalism that defined the early 20th century. Understanding this journey from Philistines to Philistine, from Roman province to a modern national movement, doesn't solve the conflicts of today, but it adds a profound depth and context that is so often missing from the headlines. It reminds us that history is never simple. Identities are complex, layered, and born from struggle. The name Palestine is not just a word. It's the echo of empires, migrations, and the enduring human desire for a place to call home. What do you think? Did any part of that origin story surprise you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read as many as we can and love to hear from you. If you found this video valuable and learned something new, please give it a like and consider subscribing to The Unifying Lens for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. Thanks for watching. See you next time.